Good day, everyone. Let's get started. My name is John Manganell. I'm Head of Business Development at RFA, and welcome to our webinar with our friends at JLL called Reentering and Reactivating the Office, the Top Considerations, Challenges, and Opportunities. In this webinar, RFA's Chief Information Officer, Michael Asher, and Bernice Boucher, Managing Director of JLL Consulting, will discuss and share a holistic view of what reentering the workplace entails and how to not only re-enter it, but to reimagine what it'll look like and how it'll operate. An impetus behind this, after many of us on this call have had many conversations with clients and colleagues of this new virtual workspace, I connected with my friend Jason Roberts at JLL and figured JLL would be an outstanding partner for this, given their deep expertise in this space. And they have a really fascinating insights into kind of what the realities of getting back to the office. So let's get going on some housekeeping items. During this event, we'll also ask you to share what your firm's plans are, whether that would be to return to the office, continue remote work, or a hybrid of both during our mid-session poll. We will share results of this poll with you along with on-demand access to today's session and a post-session follow-up. But before we get started, let's review a few key operational points. Today's session will run approximately 30 minutes long, after which we'll have a dedicated Q&A. For those of you new to Zoom, at the bottom of your PC screen, you'll see three icons: chat, raise, hand, and Q&A. Please use the Q&A icon to submit your questions as you think of them, which we'll dive into the end of today's presentation. We will do our best to get all the questions. However, if you're unable to get yours, we will follow up with you after the conclusion of today's webinar. And if you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use this to raise your hand function in our team, and we'll be in touch with you. All right, let's get started. I'd like to just introduce, for those who are not familiar with RFA, we're a cloud cybersecurity IT services firm with 30 years of industry experience in the alternate asset space. The COVID's been a really interesting time for our firm and our clients. And with the new virtual realities here to stay, we're working with our clients on things such as secure and compliant communication and collaboration platforms to enable a connected workforce. And now COVID's been a really big accelerant on people looking at their cloud strategies and digital transformation, and as well as their data strategies. So from there, I'd like to kick it off to our panelists and have Bernice intro herself and talk about JLL.
Thank you, John. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm a managing director with JLL Consulting, and my expertise is in pre-COVID. I would say it was workplace strategy, change management, human experience, and real estate optimization. And after COVID, it's all about reentry expertise, reimagination, and again, still optimizing the real estate portfolio. We're a professional services firm. We focus on real estate technologies, and our goal is to really help our clients achieve their ambitions, really to help our clients and our people in our communities. We're very much into teamwork. We're a very ethical company, and we strive to be excellent. We're in 80 countries. We have 300 offices and over 94,000 employees. So I'm looking forward to sharing with our audience today our thoughts around reentry and reimagination. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and let's get started. We'll go to the next slide.
So one of the things that we've identified here at JLL is that there's been a workplace continuity journey for everyone with the pandemic. Initially, if you look over to the left, everyone went into shock and a bit of denial and disbelief around this is a global pandemic. Everyone needs to grab their laptops and their power cords and go home, shelter in place if you could. Many companies today are looking at reentry and the phasing and what do they need to prepare for if there's additional levels of infection, whether in their city, their state, or in their building, so that they can adapt to an additional lockdown. The goal is to avoid a productivity challenge, right? Keeping everybody working well, working hard, and also anticipating what the next normal will be. The next normal will be how companies reimagine and establish this new vision for how their organization will come out of this pandemic more stronger and really thrive and flourish in this post-COVID environment. So there's an awful lot for companies to be wrestling with right now, reentry and reimagination. But the studies that are coming out of China regarding the companies that are coming out of their pandemic situation, the companies that are investing in their organizations, especially around digital transformation, are the companies that are actually gaining competitive advantage, which is a great lesson learned for all of us.
Great, we'll go on the next slide here.
So here are some of the questions that companies are asking themselves around reimagination of the next normal. People are looking at what they're learning from this whole pandemic exercise and understanding that perhaps the location of where work is getting done is becoming less relevant. Then how are you going to look at the role of the physical office? What does it represent for your brand and your values? What is the value of place in this virtual and remote world? So 4 questions that we're seeing in our work is around how to support community and connectivity, both in person and virtually. So when people do come to the office, what are they going to be interested in? From the standpoint of the type of work and activities they'll engage in. How are you going to also engage with those people who are not returning to the office, who may choose to work from home on a larger scale? We also need to look at how are we going to further respect and prioritize this whole person approach to health and well-being. So it's not just about your physical well-being, but also psychological, emotional, etc. And how can the workplace support that? Also, we're going to look at creating meaningful, safe, and engaging experiences. How are you going to further create that glue and stickiness that's really important for your culture and your brand with your employees? And also, how are you going to look at your real estate portfolio if you have more than one office? How are you going to look at creating greater flexibility and agility? So this is a great time to be bold and to be ambitious around your thinking around the workplace. How do you actually have a new mindset about the value of place? Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've identified is that creating these meaningful experiences will be more important as people come back. How are you going to create those true moments that matter? And we are breaking it down into 3 different components. First of all, there's the physical. What are those environments that will help you create a healthy workplace where people can get their work done, their teamwork done, but also connect and socialize and interact with people? That's one of the things that many people have really messed with this, shelter in place, work from home response to the pandemic. Next, there's the emotional and cultural aspect of the experiences that people are going to look for when they come back to the office. How do you actually design that experience and that journey for employees to create those moments that matter at the office? And lastly, there's the digital. So everyone's become much more reliant on technology to create these experiences with everyone being at home. But then what is that going to be like when people come back to the office and some still stay at home or work in third places? What's that seamless experience or fully integrated digital transformation and also digital ecosystem that companies should be exploring and investing in now to ensure that they will be creating great, meaningful experiences for the employees when they return to the office? Over to you, Michael.
Great. Thank you, Bernice. Thank you, John. Just to give you a little bit of introduction, my name is Michael Asher. I've been with RFA for the last 15 years and currently serve in the role of Chief Information Officer. And this challenge of motivating people, allowing people to work remotely was a problem or a challenge that we had even before COVID. So for the last 15 years that I've been at RFA, it was a common question. Can I work from home more? Can I work from home? And in certain roles, it really made sense. And we serve over 600 clients. And we see that people take different attitude towards allowing their employees to work remotely. Some find that through processes and procedures, they can make that experience be even more productive. Others feel that unless there's this camaraderie and ability to work from the single location, collaborate on ideas in the same office, they're not producing the same results. Now we see that everyone is working remotely. A lot of people love it, and many have overcome the initial hurdles of setting up the technical aspects of allowing people to work remotely. So we expect that there will be a hybrid approach once things get more normalized. And this means that from a technical perspective, that you need to look at several aspects. One of them is compliance. So this culture of compliance was easier to implement when everyone was still at the office, and there was a single point of entry. People knew what they were supposed to do when they came to work. Now that boundary has been blurred, and this culture of compliance extends to home locations. So it's critical that every business thinks about the security model and the compliance model. A lot of our clients rushed the projects that they've been doing, and they've been that they had in the pipeline for 2020 and even for 2021, and implemented changes that allowed their employees to work remotely and effectively in a very short time frame. So right now is the time to look back, to understand that everything that you've done actually fits into the framework on compliance. And from here, for this slide, I wanted to highlight several points that we think is critical, because your office location is inherently more secure. You still need to figure out a model that works going forward. And if you're assuming that it will be a hybrid scenario, then you need to make sure that in the model where your employees are working from home, you can deploy endpoint protection. You can make sure that their perimeter is secure to the extent that you're comfortable, and make sure that the tools that you have in place allow them to collaborate and they can produce the results. So it doesn't matter if they're not necessarily from the screen or in the office at the same time, but they're producing the results that are driving the business forward. Next slide, John. Great. So one of the things that we are now talking about to many of our clients is figuring out what are the actual steps if you need to remodel your office. What are the things that you need to think about? So do you have the right power sources? Because in the pre-COVID environment, it was very common for people to add more staff, and while construction is going on, everyone would huddle, sometimes even in the kitchen, right? We all have seen environments where there's just not enough space and you're trying to fit everyone, and sometimes people sit in conference rooms. So in the current situation, you need to make sure that when you're going back, the social distancing rules can apply. So figuring out if you have power, if you have connectivity, what are the benefits of adding additional for example, panels or boundaries between each employee. And if everyone is sitting so far apart, is there a point for people to come in at all? So there are some technical aspects that really go into figuring out how to best accommodate the social distancing rules. And from RFA perspective, we'll publish a simple 7-step checklist that will be available to everyone who attended.
Great, Michael. Let's we'll move on. So this is pretty top of mind for everyone. Bernice, feel free to chime in here on just virtual tools for collaboration and communication, because I felt I use a word like a broken record about accelerating, because I think many of the calls I've had, people are asking about what's Slack, what can you do with Teams. I think people are revisiting their phone systems. So I think this is a big part of having a connected workforce, given the kind of virtual environment we have.
Absolutely. That goes back to the point. If you're sitting in an office and you're so far apart, what's the reason if you to be there if you're communicating through Teams or through a unified communication system? And common questions that we have coming in from the audience is what should we be thinking about when we're selecting the right communication tool, when we're evaluating what can help us be more productive in our environment. There's so many options right now, and each option has its own advantages. And what we see is that Zoom has really dominated the space initially because it was the easiest tool to implement. It required zero knowledge of technology in order to log in and run your meetings, and became very popular initially. What really became apparent is that for corporate infrastructure, for companies that are compliant and need to record their information and make sure that all communication is monitored, um, Zoom wasn't necessarily the medium that was acceptable. So from that perspective, we started telling our clients to look at ecosystems. If you are doing something internally and you're trying to make sure that you foster communication and you have ability to have uh, team meetings, it's important to see each other. It's important that you see your teammates face to face, have happy hour drinks at 5, and it's critical that you can communicate and send your files as well. So we started looking at ecosystems, and that's where Microsoft Teams came in and became very popular in circles where you are protecting your data. You're thinking about making sure that you can share files. And from that perspective, it started to dominate within the departments or even within the firms where unified communication was critical. So security was very important, compliance was very important. In Teams, there's an option that allows you to watermark your content. And when you're presenting or sharing content in specific data rooms to third-party vendors, you can reasonably protect, you can take extra measures to protect this information. Because initially, anecdotally, people would just share files through Zoom and hoping that no one take a screenshot while they're doing it. There are other options as well. If you don't need an ecosystem, Slack is a very useful tool, allows you to chat instantaneously. It's a very user-friendly environment, allows you to get up and running at a much faster pace than Teams, especially if you don't have a technology team to help you out. But as far as compliance, as far as ecosystem that provides you to work entirely and share documents in one system, share documents with third-party vendors, we still see that Microsoft Teams right now is kind of uncontested player in our space. Obviously, Google is there as well. From RFA perspective, we're less focused on technology and startups and technology. A fintech environment, we're more focused on the financial space. So with our clients, Google is probably has a very small footprint. And if you have any questions, there are obviously pros and cons for each option that we listed out here, and others as well. Feel free to chime in, and we'll get to your questions at the end of the presentation. Bernice?
Thank you, Michael. So one of the things that we wanted to share with you today are some thoughts around how to approach this discussion within your own company around the future of work. And what we're finding is that companies are looking at, number one, their workflows of their employees. How are people working? What are their work patterns? How integrated are they across teams? Are they being agile and adaptive? Is work happening asynchronously, which means different time zones? How much have they embraced a digital transformation from the standpoint of how work is getting done post-COVID versus pre-COVID? And then there's the opportunity to look at your workforce itself. Um, who are those employees that have adapted well? Who are those employees that have not? How are people feeling about their engagement level with your organization or their health and well-being? How are they feeling about their performance and the satisfaction with working from home? How are they looking at the future, and how is that going to impact your business strategy? And lastly, there's this digital workplace component. Where is work happening? What tools are they using? Have they, has your company introduced tools that actually are helpful, or because of lack of training or understanding of how to use those tools, has change management not been done in such a way that people are adopting quickly and they're adopting broadly within your company? Once you have an understanding of your workflow, your workforce, and the digital workplace, then you can start looking at how you want to approach the physical workspace. What should that be about? What we're hearing is that as much as people are interested in the work from home options, they are still very interested, many, in coming back to work. And they, meaning coming back to the office to work. If they're going to do individual work, there's an interest in, like, if I can just do that at home, that's fine. But when I do want to collaborate, interact with other people, do more communication or innovation sort of ideation, then we're seeing that people are very interested in coming back to the office for those types of activities. So that'll have an impact on how you're designing and planning your workspace. It'll also have an impact on um, the building. What we're seeing is, in a post-pandemic world, people are much more interested in an intelligent building that with touchless services, with technology that makes it a smarter building, that has better HVAC systems, so you're improving the quality of the air, the water, and the experience that people are having in the workplace. And lastly, that'll have an impact on your overall portfolio. So every company needs to make their own decisions about what Accenture calls this digital elastic workplace ecosystem. Where is work happening? The office, at home, a third place? Is it going to be in a central business district, or let's say in a suburb? So that you can then look at your portfolio. How liquid can your portfolio be? How responsive can it be to the various business units and departments in your company, so that you're looking at decision making through your brand, your culture, your values, and with a focus on the health and well-being of your employees. Michael?
Great. On our end, we see that, and this is actually a slide that relates to several questions that are coming in right now. So from a technology perspective, from a business continuity perspective, we've seen that the investors have even previously approved home offices. It's just those home offices were designated for VIPs, executives of the firm, and they had the same safeguards as offices of smaller firms, actual offices of smaller firms, right? So now what we're trying to do, we're trying to replicate the same, but at much lower cost. And luckily with public cloud, it is accessible to pretty much everyone, because public cloud allows you to implement controls that safeguard your data to a specific ecosystem without allowing it to leak, and reasonable safeguards in place to prevent data leakage. There are some challenges in a hybrid environment, and those challenges are, if you're relying on this public cloud infrastructure, central repository, then you need to think about backups, you need to think about disaster recovery and your business continuity plan, because what happens is that SharePoint, Office 365, OneDrive, they're hosted somewhere. It's a data center, it's a single data center. And if you think that there's redundancy built in Office 365 or Amazon environment, the same way that you have it at the office, where you have a disaster recovery site and failover is timed, it's not the same. So you need to engage a third-party vendor and make sure that you have redundancy outside of your main provider. Security, reasonable security is available straight from Microsoft. Intune is a mobile device management product that you can deploy and make sure that if your laptops or home PCs are out of compliance, you cannot access corporate data. So that's something that is possible and already being deployed across a lot of our clients. Cloud access security services prevent you from downloading information even if you are not on your computer. So there's so many tools that are available from Microsoft, and a lot of third-party vendors are there as well if you would like to pay a little bit more but have ability to do some unique things or make sure that the interface is a little bit easier to navigate. We talked about culture of compliance, archiving, data governance. From an important aspect there is that this requirement has been around for a long time. What's important now is that as we are more distributed, it's critical that you have single source of truth. So now more than ever, it's important that if you had in pipeline a data warehousing project or a SharePoint project where you have a single repository where everyone collaborates and you are trying to get away from reliance on a single vendor for the data or making sure that everyone who's working on the data is not conflicting and there's no reconciliation project at the end. This is an important step to take to make sure that you can actually be in compliance. Because if you don't have that ability to share files securely or work on the same files at the same time, then culture of compliance is just a term that you use to pass your ODD. In this situation, it's critical that you do what everyone else is doing, smart global relay for email, but also think about data warehousing or data management strategy that you have. In terms of productivity, out-of-the-box solution that provides the entire ecosystem, right? It's Office, specifically looking at and focusing Office from Microsoft Office 365, focusing on the firms that need compliance, Google, focusing on more innovative startups that don't necessarily need compliance and working mostly from a web interface. And those are kind of two major competing systems that provide ecosystems. Outside of that, you have third-party products that you can put together and create something on your own. However, in that situation, you need to think about integration. And whenever any integration is done, there's always maintenance and there's always framework that has to be put in place to make sure that you stay compliant as there are developments. That's pretty much it for this slide. Let's move on. Bernice?
Thank you, Michael. I think what we want to leave our audience with are some thoughts around reimagination of the future work. And to navigate the next normal, you'll all have to think about reactivating space, because as much as people have been working from home, there's a demand to come back to the office, and balancing the ratio of time at home, time at the office will be important for everyone to determine. And when you do come back, it'll be about respecting the health and well-being of your employees. That's not going to go away, not until there is a pharmaceutical intervention, until there's a vaccine or there's a cure. We will need to be thinking about our health and well-being very broadly. And lastly, it's really about revitalizing that workplace experience. What's it going to be like for people to come back? What is that experience they're going to have? What is it that they are expecting when they come back? And so really looking at how people will connect and collaborate and contribute to the overall success of the organization and themselves and their teams will be really critical. I think we're going to go to questions now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Bernice and Michael. We're getting some great questions from the audience. From my point of view, obviously a lot of thought needs to be put in this, what 2020 could look like, and then going into 2021. A high level view, we got a question, just, Bernice and Michael, just talk about what are your clients talking about? Just about, is anyone, any of our in our client world, client base of financial services, alts, or anyone looking to go 100% virtual? Are we seeing any kind of momentum around that concept?
So the only organization that I've seen, and they're being very public about this, in going 100% remote or virtual, is Nationwide Insurance. They were very public in their decision to close 5 of their offices and send everyone home to work permanently. That is a business decision on their part that I'm not seeing across other companies. What we're seeing is a bit of the interest in looking at the work from home model from a business driver perspective. There are 5 reasons why companies are looking at it, and looking at what percentage their population should be working from home. So one of the first business drivers is around pressure from investors and shareholders around disaster recovery. Okay, so no one, and I speak to people 2-3 times a day, different companies, and I've been asking every company that I talk to, did you have a global pandemic in your business continuity plan? I have yet to find a single company to answer yes to that question. Now everyone is going to have a global pandemic as part of their plan, but investors and shareholders have been very active in saying to companies, hey, how are you going to recover from this? What are you going to do next time? Because there may, definitely be a next time. Then there's the driver around employees. This is what employees who never worked from home before would like to incorporate it into their overall plan in the future. But what we're seeing is that there's probably 20% of the population that would love to just come back to the office full time. That working from home is not something that appeals to them, either from a work style perspective, or they don't have the space, they don't have the right technology. They would much rather come back to the office. Then there are those who are like, I'm never coming back. I'm perfectly happy working from home. Could be 20% of the population. But then the remaining 60% of people are looking at, I want to be flexible. I want to have the autonomy to choose. So those people, according to our surveys and other surveys that we've seen, they want to flex between 50-50. 50% in the office, 50% working from home, and they want to be able to choose those times. And then the third driver is managers are more comfortable now that they've experienced it. They're more open to it. The third business driver is around the C-suite. The C-suite has recognized that they have been able to realize savings from a decreased need for real estate, and also the reduced cost of business travel. We're going to see an impact on business travel where there'll be less and less of it based on this experience. And so they're looking at that in the face of another recession. How can they preserve cash? How can they reduce cost saving, reduce costs? And that is another big reason. And then the fourth reason is around the work from home impact on the environment and sustainability. So organizations are much more focused on sustainability, especially coming out of Davos last year, and with the Bloomberg Green Initiative, companies are very focused on sustainability and the environment. Everyone's seen the clear water in the canals of Venice and the clear air in India, where they can actually see the mountains. It's been decades. So that is not being lost on companies. So I would say, yes, there may be some companies who'll say, well, we're going to be totally virtual, but I don't think that's going to be the norm. I think it's going to be much more of a range, and every company has to make their own decisions about what's the right thing for their business, for their employees, and for productivity and employee satisfaction.
Yeah, and on our end, what we see with clients pretty much echoes the same sentiment. Surprisingly, though, the companies that decided to work remotely 100% were hedge funds on our end. So we deal with private equity, hedge funds, funds of funds, but private equity are people that are traveling, and one would think that if someone would decide to work 100% remote, it'd probably be most likely the firm that does that constantly and already has been doing this for a while, but that's not the case. I think that's mostly driven by factors that are different from collaboration. It's the fact that if you don't need an office, you can save some costs, and that's the initial kind of knee-jerk reaction of some smaller firms. Most firms that we talk to probably are looking at the hybrid approach, as Bernice pointed out, making sure that there is this space to collaborate when people do need to come together. At the same time, it's hard to retain talent if you impose strict rules and say that you now all have to come back, because there will be other employers that will say, well, we now have this policy, we now have this framework. To tie it into kind of technical questions that are coming in, how do you tie it to home security? How do you tie it to cloud infrastructure? What's the best approach in cloud and public cloud and hybrid environment? Just wanted to say that what we're seeing is less reliance on endpoints. Endpoints are your devices, meaning your computer, your desktop. Your computer and desktop stores less and less information. Everything is in public cloud for those that are old enough and remember mainframe concepts. It certainly looks like it's going that route, where public cloud is this mainframe. And what you do is that you just present information on your device, whether it's a phone or your desktop. And in this situation, all public cloud providers are now rolling out features that allow you to lock it down to a degree where you can't export and exfiltrate data without explicit approval. And if something is wrong with your device that you're accessing your corporate network, you will just be denied. So all those things point in the fact that in order for us to be successful there, we need to start thinking about education. So this is a paradigm shift for a lot of companies. And what do we do first? We try to be creative, we try to be productive, but if we don't know how, we invent our own ways, right? That's just human nature, that's who we are. So it's critical that once you figure out what works for you, you communicate it to your staff and educate. You go through a round of training sessions and explicitly state, so from a technology perspective, this is what's allowed, this is what's not allowed. And maybe initially you'll get some feedback and you'll have to either adjust or buy some additional products that allow you to collaborate more freely. So that's a process that starts probably with compliance framework and goes into education of staff and making sure that the technology that you're implementing and restricting data flow or enhancing data flow works for your firm.
Great. We have about 5 minutes left. My friend Jason Roberts in one of our pre-calls was a question about investing in the office itself, right? You know, how companies should think about CapEx in the near term while being a little more strategic and not having a knee-jerk reaction. And we're, you know, at RFA, we're getting a lot of calls about, can you go in and reconfigure the space a bit? But Bernice, I want you to kind of cover that, you know, kick it off and cover that angle, because it really is something that's top of mind with people.
So when it comes to reentry, meaning starting to phase people to come back to the office, as long as the government says that in your state or city, that is the new policy that you can bring people back. And your landlord also says that your building is open and they are taking care of cleaning and security protocols and the capacity, then you can look as an occupier to come back and decide how are you going to implement social distancing, how are you going to deal with amenities and services and keep people safe and healthy, be prepared for questions around who's providing PPE, like is the company going to provide masks or do testing? I think there are a lot of questions that companies have to answer for themselves on how they're going to invest in keeping people healthy and safe as they return to work before there's a vaccine or a cure. It's beyond that companies are looking at reimagination. once there is a pharmaceutical invention, we're seeing the opportunity to look at bringing people back and having them have the experience that they're looking for around reconnecting with their colleagues, collaborating more, connecting more, having a social hub where people can feel welcome. Where's the beating heart of your organization in your space? I think there's going to be an opportunity to really look at what we say here around reactivating space and revitalizing the workplace experience. Why should people come back to the office? If they're doing their job perfectly well at home, then determining for yourselves what the value of place is in this remote and virtual world will be very good work to do in advance of bringing everybody back. It was a great question.
It is a great question, and I see that we're coming up short on time, and I see additional questions that are rolling in, and I would encourage everyone who registered. We will send out information about the RFA and JLL, and if you have any additional questions or questions that we haven't touched, please send them in. We'll be happy to answer them individually. From a technology perspective, I have the same view, is that technology is here to empower us. It's important that as we go back into this new normal hybrid, probably, again, it's just my opinion, kind of a disclaimer. I don't know what will happen in the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but the thought process is that this hybrid approach will probably dominate, and people will expect some ability to work from home, and that capability should be made available through technology. Technology should be able to foster that collaborative interaction. And from our perspective, if you're not in public cloud yet, that's the easiest way to deploy that collaborative space, is through going to a public cloud, at least for some aspects. Obviously, not all products are developed for public cloud, so some sort of a hybrid approach sometimes still makes sense. Look at your compliance policies, look at your frameworks through which you verify security and compliance, and make sure that you adjust them specifically for the work from home environment. And that's something that's an additional work for a compliance officer, so people that are serving in that role. But at the end of the day, it's critical because it's an additional entry point into your network, and sometimes that's the least protected entry point. So be very cognizant of that. Again, any additional questions, we'll be happy to answer them individually. And I would like to thank you so much, John. Back to you.
Yeah, well, I think we're a minute. We want to be cognizant of everyone's times. Thanks, Michael, for speaking. I'll hand it, Bernice. I'll let you wrap it up and say goodbye to everyone. I really appreciate you putting the effort. There's a lot of prep in these webinars, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. But thanks for the JLO gang for working and participating with us.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.